absolute swamp. As he sat in solitude in the closed carriage, he took out his mother's letter and his brother's note and read them through. Yes, it was the same thing over and over again. Everyone, his mother, his brother, everyone thought fit to interfere in the affairs of his heart. This interference aroused in him a feeling of angry hatred, a feeling he had rarely known before. What business is it of theirs? Why does everybody feel called upon to concern himself about me? And why do they worry me so? Just because they see that this is something they can't understand. If it were a common, vulgar, worldly intrigue, they would have left me alone. They feel that this is something different, that this is not a mere pastime, that this woman is dearer to me than life. This is incomprehensible, and that's why it annoys them. Whatever our destiny is, or may be, we have made it ourselves, and we do not complain of it, he said, in the word we, linking himself with Anna. No, they must teach us how to live. They haven't an idea of what happiness is. They don't know that without our love, for us, there is neither happiness nor unhappiness, no life at all, he thought. He was angry with all of them for their interference, just because he felt in his soul that they, all these people, were right. He felt that the love that bound him to Anna was not a momentary impulse which would pass, as worldly intrigues do pass, leaving no other traces in the life of either but pleasant or unpleasant memories. He felt all the torture of his own and her position, all the difficulty there was for them, conspicuous as they were in the eyes of the whole world, in concealing their love, in lying and deceiving, feigning and continually thinking of others, when the passion that united them was so intense that they were both oblivious of everything else but their love. He vividly recalled all the constantly recurring instances of inevitable necessity for lying and deceit, which were so against his natural bent. He recalled particularly vividly the shame he had more than once detected in her at this necessity for lying and deceit, and he experienced the strange feeling that had sometimes come upon him since his secret love for Anna. This was a feeling of loathing for something, whether for Alexey Alexandrovitch or for himself or for the whole world he couldn't have said, but he always drove away this strange feeling. Now, too, he shook it off and continued the thread of his thoughts. Yes, she was unhappy before, but proud and at peace. And now she cannot be at peace and feel secure in her dignity, though she doesn't show it. Yes, we must put an end to it, he decided. And for the first time, the idea clearly presented itself that it was essential to put an end to this false position, and the sooner the better. Give up everything, she and I, and hide ourselves somewhere alone with our love, he said to himself. Chapter 22. The rain didn't last long, and by the time Vronsky arrived, his shaft horse trotting at full speed and dragging the trace horses galloping through the mud with their reins hanging loose, the sun had peeked out again. The roofs of the summer villas and the old lime trees in the gardens on both sides of the principal streets sparkled with wet brilliance, and from the twigs came a pleasant drip, and from the roofs rushing streams of water. He thought no more of the shower spoiling the racetrack, but was rejoicing now that, thanks to the rain, he would be sure to find her at home and alone, as he knew that Alexey Alexandrovitch, who had lately returned from a foreign spa, had not moved from Petersburg. Hoping to find her alone, Vronsky alighted, as he always did to avoid attracting attention, before crossing the bridge, and walked to the house. He didn't use the steps to the front, but went through the yard. "Has your master come?" he asked a gardener. "No, sir. The mistress is at home. But will you please go to the front door? There are servants there," the gardener answered. "They'll open the door." "No, I'll go in from the garden." And feeling certain that she was alone, and wanting to take her by surprise, since he hadn't promised to be there today, and she would certainly not expect him to come before the races, he walked, holding his sword, and stepping cautiously over the sandy path bordered with flowers to the terrace that looked out upon the garden. Vronsky forgot now all that he had thought of along the way, of the hardships and difficulties of their position. He thought of nothing but that he would see her very soon, not in imagination, but living, all of her, as she was in reality. He was just going in, stepping on his whole foot so as not to creak, up the worn steps of the terrace, when he suddenly remembered what he always forgot, and what caused the most torturing side of his relations with her. Her son, with his questioning, hostile, it seemed to him, eyes. This boy was more often than anyone else a check upon their freedom. When he was present, both Vronsky and Anna didn't merely avoid speaking of anything that they could not have repeated before everyone. They didn't even allow themselves to refer by hints to anything the boy didn't understand. They had made no agreement about this. It had determined itself. They would have felt it an insult to themselves to deceive the child. In his presence they talked like acquaintances. But in spite of this caution, Vronsky often saw the child's intent, bewildered gaze fixed upon him, and a strange shyness, uncertainty, at one time friendliness, at another coldness and reserve in the boy's manner to him, as though the child felt that between this man and his mother there existed some important bond, the significance of which he couldn't understand. In fact, the boy did feel that he couldn't understand this relation, and he tried painfully and was not able to make clear to himself what feeling he ought to have for this man. With a child's keen instinct for every manifestation of feeling, he saw distinctly that his father, his governess, his nurse, all did not merely dislike Vronsky, but looked on him with horror and aversion, though they never said anything about him, while his mother looked on him as her greatest friend. What does it mean? Who is he? How should I love him? If I don't know, it's my fault. Either I'm stupid or a naughty boy, thought the child. And this was what caused his dubious, inquiring, sometimes hostile expression, and the shyness and uncertainty which Vronsky found so irksome. This child's presence always and infallibly called up in Vronsky that strange feeling of inexplicable loathing which he had experienced of late. This child's presence called up both in Vronsky and in Anna a feeling akin to the feeling of a sailor who sees by the compass that the direction in which he is swiftly moving is far from the right one, but that to arrest his motion is not in his power, that every instant is carrying him further and further away, and that to admit to himself his deviation from the right direction is the same as admitting his certain ruin. This child, with his innocent outlook upon life, was the compass that showed them the point to which they had departed, from what they knew but did not want to know. This time Seryozha was not at home, and she was completely alone. She was sitting on the terrace waiting for the return of her son, who had gone out for his walk and had been caught in the rain. She had sent a manservant and a maid out to look for him. Dressed in a white gown, deeply embroidered, she was sitting in a corner of the terrace behind some flowers and didn't hear him. Bending her curly black head, she pressed her forehead against a cool watering can that stood on the parapet, and both her lovely hands, with the rings he knew so well, clasped the pot. The beauty of her whole figure, her head, her neck, her hands, struck Vronsky every time as something new and unexpected. He stood still, gazing at her in ecstasy. But as soon as he would have made a step to come nearer to her, she was aware of his presence, pushed away the watering can, and turned her flushed face toward him. "What's the matter? You're ill?" he said to her in French, going up to her. He would have run to her, but remembering that there might be spectators, he looked around toward the balcony door, and reddened a little, as he always reddened, feeling that he had to be afraid and on his guard. "No, I'm well," she said, getting up and pressing his outstretched hand tightly. "I didn't expect you." "My God, what cold hands," he said. "You startled me," she said. "I'm alone and expecting Seryozha. He's out for a walk. They'll come in from this side." But in spite of her efforts to be calm, her lips were quivering. "Forgive me for coming, but I couldn't pass the day without seeing you," he went on, speaking French as he always did to avoid using you, so impossibly cold in Russian, and the dangerously intimate singular. Forgive you? I'm so glad. But you're ill or worried, he went on, not letting go her hands and bending over her. What were you thinking of? Always of the same thing, she said with a smile. She spoke the truth. If ever, at any moment, she had been asked what she was thinking of, she could have answered truly, of the same thing, of her happiness and her unhappiness. She was thinking, just when he came upon her, of this. Why was it, she wondered, that for others, for Betsy, she knew of her secret liaison with Tushkevich, it was so easy, while for her it was such torture. Today her thought gained special poignancy from certain other considerations. She asked him about the races. He answered her questions, and seeing that she was agitated, trying to calm her, he began telling her in the simplest tone the details of his preparations for the races. Tell him or not to tell him, she thought, looking into his quiet, affectionate eyes. He's so happy, so absorbed in his races that he won't understand as he should. He won't understand the gravity of this fact to us. But you haven't told me what you were thinking of when I came in, he said, interrupting his narrative. Please tell me. She didn't answer, and bending her head a little, she looked inquiringly at him from under her brows, her eyes shining under their long lashes. Her hand shook as it played with a leaf she had picked. He saw it, and his face expressed that utter subjection, that slavish devotion which had done so much to win her. I can see something has happened. Do you suppose I can be at peace knowing you have a trouble I'm not sharing? Tell me, for God's sake, he repeated imploringly. Yes, I won't be able to forgive him if he doesn't realize the full gravity of it. Better not tell. Why put him to the test, she thought, still staring at him in the same way, and feeling that the hand that held the leaf was trembling more and more. For God's sake, he repeated, taking her hand. Shall I tell you? Yes, yes, yes. I'm pregnant, she said, softly and deliberately. The leaf in her hand shook more violently, but she didn't take her eyes off him, watching for his reaction. He turned white, would have said something, but stopped. He dropped her hand, and his head sank on his breast. Yes, he realizes the full seriousness of it, she thought, and gratefully she pressed his hand. But she was mistaken in thinking he realized the gravity of the fact as she, a woman, realized it. On hearing it, he felt come upon him with tenfold intensity that strange feeling of loathing of someone. But at the same time, he felt that the turning point he had been longing for had come now, that it was impossible to go on concealing things from her husband, and it was inevitable in one way or another that they should soon put an end to their unnatural position. But besides that, her emotion physically affected him in the same way. He looked at her with a look of submissive tenderness, kissed her hand, got up, and in silence paced up and down the terrace. Yes, he said, going up to her resolutely. Neither you nor I have looked on our relations as a passing amusement, and now our fate is sealed. It is absolutely necessary to put an end, he looked around as he spoke, to the deception in which we are living. Put an end? How put an end, Alexei? She said softly. She was calmer now, and her face lighted up with a tender smile. Leave your husband, and make our life one. It is one as it is, she answered scarcely audibly. Yes, but altogether, altogether. But how, Alexei? Tell me how, she said, in melancholy mockery at the hopelessness of her own position. Is there any way out of such a position? Am I not the wife of my husband? There is a way out of every situation. We must make a decision, he said. Anything's better than the situation in which you're living. Of course I see how you torture yourself over everything. The world, and your son, and your husband. Oh, not over my husband, she said with a quiet smile. I don't know him. I don't think of him. He doesn't exist. You're not speaking sincerely. I know you. You'll worry about him too. Oh, he doesn't even know, she said. And suddenly a hot flush came over her face. Her cheeks, her brow, her neck crimsoned, and tears of shame came into her eyes. But we won't talk of him. Chapter 23. Vronsky had several times already, though not so resolutely as now, tried to get her to consider their situation, and every time he had been confronted by the same superficiality and triviality with which she met his appeal now.